Everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion on how data centers are shaping South Carolina manufacturing. So we've got more than 160 registered today from across the state, which will make this the largest OpExchange event in our history. So that in itself speaks volumes about the importance of this topic and interest it holds for manufacturers across South Carolina. So this event actually came about earlier this year when Shane Whatley, he approached me with this idea. And Shane has a unique perspective. Many of you know him already through his work with THS Constructors. He's been involved in a number of plant expansions and projects for OpExchange member companies. His view from the construction side, coupled with the rapid growth of data centers across the United States, make this a natural topic for us to bring to you, the OpExchange network. And clearly, the timing is right. We've already seen several OpExchange member companies that have had impacted growth from this. For example, Aersys, which is right up the road from me. I live in Duncan, right up the road from me, and I passed by their expansion plant. So they've had expansion that's tied directly to data centers explosion. So they provide cooling system for some of the largest data centers. And I know about several other tier 2 and tier 3 providers in the OpExchange network that have increased volumes due to this growth. So in today's panel, you'll actually hear from AFL and Daedalus, who are both experiencing this impact firsthand in their business. Now, before we get into the discussion, I just want to take a moment for those of you who are new to the OpExchange. The OpExchange is South Carolina's only manufacturing benchmarking network. We're a community of over 220 companies, and we're growing monthly, that actively collaborate to share best practice in lean, advanced manufacturing, leadership, and operational improvement. Through plant visits, workshops, and peer-to-peer connections, our members gain actionable insights that they can bring back with them to their sites to deliver performance and increase competitiveness. And the best thing is to improve the life and welfare of their employees. So I've personally been involved in the OpExchange for 18 years, and I've been leading the group for the last 5 for the South Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the SMEP. In that time, membership has more than doubled. But even as we've grown, we've stayed constant it's a culture of openness and collaboration. It's a group that truly shares what works from the shop floor all the way to the front office. So each year we hold approximately 36 events, which include plant visits, workshops, and virtual sessions like this one. And membership extends to everyone at your site, so that anyone on your team can take part in all of these events. And beyond the events themselves, members have access to our online portal, which is a repository for shared resources, presentations, documentation, even videos from our past visits. So with that context, let's move into today's program. And just a couple of quick guidelines before I turn it over. We are recording this session, and it will be made available on the portal probably tomorrow. So please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. And Shane will be leading today's panel discussion, and he'll save some time at the end for questions and answers so you can bring your questions directly to the panelists. So feel free to type any questions you have in the chat window during the session. With that, thank you again for being here and for making this the largest OpExchange event in history. I really look forward to the conversation that we're going to have. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shane. Shane.
Thanks, Mike. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to host this event. My name is Shane Whatley with THS Constructors, and we've been serving the advanced manufacturing community for their construction needs for the last 20 years, mostly focused in South Carolina. When you and I were discussing ideas for this event, my mind immediately went to the data centers and the explosive growth in data centers, and what I'm seeing from a construction perspective, how that may affect our fellow members from an advanced manufacturing and operations perspective. The way that I've structured this panel is to try to give different viewpoints of data centers and how they're going to impact South Carolina's manufacturing community. That ranges from the 30,000 foot view from real estate and site selection down to construction aspects, and then finally at the ground level, where from a sales perspective and an operations perspective for the different opportunities that are out there for the Op Exchange members, whether it be to streamline operations using AI that is feeding off of the data centers and using the data centers, or whether that be from a sales perspective for future business and future partnerships with the growth in the industry. So I'm excited to get this panel started, and with that, we'll get going with CBRE.
Atlanta has since, and Georgia Power has since, to a degree, not run out of power, but they are limited on what they can offer to customers, and the timeline to deliver power just continues to get longer and more expensive for customers. So a lot of that development activity is now kind of filtered. Again, since the 2020 timeframe, development kind of really spiked in Atlanta, and now today that Atlanta is out of power as well, and development is now coming to the Carolinas, and basically the entire I-85 corridor from Richmond all the way down to the upstate of South Carolina, because we have transmission capacity and generation capacity from the power utility companies. Shane, I'm going to jump to your third question.
Yeah, go for it.
And regarding the energy outlook, the first thing that as I have talked to my customers, the first thing I talk to them about is the process for procuring power. I'll speak specifically to Duke Energy because I deal with them the most. I do have projects in Dominion, South Carolina's territory that I'm involved in. I have not dealt much with Santee Cooper, but I think every power company to a degree is in a similar situation. They're in a state of flux. Their businesses are changing significantly. They haven't generated new power in the longest while, and now they're being forced to change their business models and generate new power. Duke Energy defines a large load customer as somebody, as of today, a customer who consumes 100 megawatts or more. Now, my understanding is that they're changing that to 50 megawatts or more very soon, because people like to try to get in right under that threshold. Their processes and the requirements change almost weekly, and that's not an exaggeration, certainly on a monthly basis. They require upfront deposits of customers for substation equipment and any upstream electrical infrastructure build costs that a specific site would have. Those deposits are taken before the customer even signs the electric service agreement. The electric service agreements, which need to be signed within a very short period after the letter of intent stage, which again, there's been another change there. It was 12 months, it then became 6 months, now it's 4 months. They have it's called industry lingo calls it a take or pay contract. In essence, the customers commit to a 15-year term, and they have to pay a minimum of 75% of what their utility commitment is, whether they use the power or not. And the intent and requirement in Duke doing this is that they want to provide security for new generation assets that are needed to serve the customers. And truly, they really only want the end users to sign the contracts for those large loads.
How does that work, Ben, if from a developer driven data center where it's more of a spec perspective and not so much of a build to suit?
Again, they want the developers are either going to come in and they're going to be below the large load threshold, or there's a few developers who have rated credits, so they might be a triple B plus or a, and Duke can underwrite that credit and allow them to sign an electric service agreement. And that's solely so Duke can go to the financial markets and leverage that contract.
Gotcha.
So let me finish, Shane, if you don't mind. I'll get to the end, and then you get of the energy component, and then I'll let you fire away with a question or two.
Sure.
The Duke again specifically in the early 2020s, they generated 34 gigawatts across their entire footprint in the Carolinas. That of that 34, I think about 12 of it was legacy Duke Progress generation, and the balance, the other 22, was Duke Power legacy generation. So that's North South Carolina. They intend to add 8 gigawatts by 2030, and they intend to add another 31 gigawatts by 2038. I think in the question there you asked about other sources of generation. The majority of that is gas and renewables. And again, you can pull up probably a resource plan, integrated resource plan from any of these power companies on their websites and see the specific types of generation that they plan to use, when and where. The first SMRs that I believe Duke is planning to deploy are not until the mid 2030s, like 2035, 2036 timeframe at Blues Creek, which is near Winston-Salem. And it's really only a 200 megawatt deployment, if I remember correctly. So natural gas and renewables are being used to bridge to the SMRs. Now, I'll pause there. Shane, if you had another question.
Yeah, it was one of the other, you've got power, you've got water that are massive concerns. Are you seeing anything from the communities themselves that there's some resistance or hesitancy towards these hyperscalers that are popping up in typically a little bit more rural areas?
Yeah, I think every community is unique. I think if they've planned ahead for industrial land uses in their community, and those data center users are wanting to acquire that industrial zoned land, there's less resistance. And the challenges are more often arising when rezonings are needed and annexations. None of these data center groups want to show up and get into a fight. They want to be into a community that's welcoming. And I think a lot of the rezoning pushbacks that you're seeing in the news are from the developer community, because it's hard to find industrial zoned land. As from a community perspective, they do have to consider water and sewer infrastructure. Some of these data center groups will fund new water sewer infrastructure for the communities. On the unemployment rate for communities, or the type of employment, is also a big consideration. And I don't want to steal Lindsay's thunder here, but for example, Catawba County, outside in the Hickory area outside of Charlotte, their employment base changed from 25% office and 75% manufacturing to it basically flip-flopped. And they didn't have reservation about giving away all their power essentially to Microsoft, because they knew their employment base was going to be predominantly office driven employees. There are also benefits to the communities for obviously increases in tax revenue, limited impact on schools because they have few employees, limited impacts on roads because they have few employees, limited impacts on the social services like police and fire because there are so few employees. And I think not every parcel in every community needs to be a data center. They're I think the town of Maiden had Apple locate there back in 2009, I believe it was. They were able to reduce their tax rate, and they had additional facilities that they've been able to build with the additional revenue that they got from Apple.
Awesome. All right, we will, Nelson, if you're good, we'll move on to the site selection aspect of it. Nelson, if you want to give just a quick background on your experience and Parker Poe's work with the manufacturing community in South Carolina.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. Appreciate the chance to be here today. So Parker Poe Consulting is primarily a site selection and incentive negotiation firm. Most of our clients are manufacturers. Certainly many of them are in South Carolina, but we have clients all over the country. We locate them in communities all over the country. I'd say over half of our clients are international. So we somewhat specialize in helping foreign-based companies find a location wherever they need to be in the U.S. And once we find them a location, we also help them to negotiate and incentives and get the approval process, get all those incentives approved for them for the long term. We have both manufacturing headquarters projects, but also data centers. So a lot of what Ben just talked about, we've had several data center clients. They're different. You approach them different just because the criteria for data centers can be somewhat similar to manufacturers, but the overemphasis on power and water really makes them unique, and it does limit the number of places I think that those projects can go. So, but happy to jump in on your question, Shane.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a manufacturer's perspective, when you are working with these manufacturers that are considering South Carolina, which county or which site to pick, where does the growth of data centers and the rising data needs, does it influence their decisions on where they want to be, or one county or one location over another?
Right. The short answer is it depends, and that's a great answer from someone who works with a law firm. I'm not a lawyer, but that's your typical lawyer response. Is it depends. For those manufacturers who have highly automated processes, are moving rapidly into AI, or have the need for real-time analytics, being near a data center may be important. And for those companies, minimizing the data latency, and of course, that's the time it takes for a packet of data to go from the origin to the destination and back, right? And so for those companies that are utilizing AI and real-time analytics, you don't want that delay. And so the way to help lessen that impact is to be closer to a data center, right? Mm-hmm. So, that the quicker it can go back and forth, the better you are. The other way to manage that is maybe not locating on a high traffic network, right? The issue there is what may not be a high traffic network today, most likely is not going to remain that way. And so you may be able to handle that in the short term by going to a network line that is not as heavily traveled as others. But ultimately, I think you'll run into those issues in the future. For now, I'd say most manufacturers, this is probably not an issue yet, but it will become one as more companies move towards using AI and other technology advances.
have you ever worked with any clients that are more, they say, hey, look, we understand where things are going on the AI front, but we want to be as far away from a data center as possible, or we're really concerned about what this may do to our energy costs or our water costs. Do you have any conversations like that with the clients?
We have, and they're becoming more prevalent, right? And I'll give you, so it kind of goes to some of the issues and obstacles that manufacturers are running into in their site selection. For those companies that have large power loads or have a need for high volumes of water, locating in those communities with existing data centers may impact availability of power and water. Ben just talked about, how utilities are having to deal with this, capacity levels. Well, they're struggling with not just providing capacity for new data centers, but they have to still provide power to existing manufacturers and still have capacity for companies expanding. I mean, if you're in South Carolina and you have an expansion coming up, you obviously want to make sure that there's power available. So that's a major struggle for utilities in the future. And if you're a company that has a large power load, you definitely want to pay attention to where those data centers are, because it could impact the availability of capacity in the utilities system. Same goes for water, right? A lot of data centers are big water users. I know that is changing with new technology and ways to cool, but many of them still are big water users. And so if you are if you're a manufacturer that needs water, then you have to take that into consideration. Do I want to go into a community that has multiple data centers that are maybe impacting the availability of power and water? I'll give you an example. So on the power side, take, for instance, a battery manufacturer for EVs, right? Their power requirements are significant. I mean, really significant, and in some cases equal to some of the data center on the power side. So if we're locating one, we want to look into areas that have available power. And the first thing we're going to do is look in a community to see how many data centers are there, right? That may lessen the availability. But the problem, and the good news about a data center is, as Ben mentioned, big power user, not a big employer. On a battery manufacturer, of course, it's both. You have to have the electricity available, but you also have to have a sufficient size labor force to accommodate the needs for their operations. And generally, battery manufacturers require still a good bit of data. That may change over time with automation, but for now, they're a big job creator. And so you've got to find that location, and this generally means close to an urban population that has available power and and available labor. That's somewhat of a hard thing to find these days. And kind of similarly on water, if you're a food and beverage company that needs significant amount of water, maybe it's beverages, maybe it's you're using water in your process. Water and sewer capacity is a big deal. And so when you're looking in communities, you're looking in counties, you've got to see who is already there and what those capacity levels are. And it may be a case of you moving to more rural areas, because a lot of food and bev companies don't require as much labor. And so you can move out a little bit more, but then those rural communities generally don't have a ton of available water and sewer capacity. So right. it does raises some issues during those type of searches.
So kind of expanding on this a little bit, we'll get off script here just slightly, Nelson. because this question just popped in my mind. But in my conversations with the Department of Commerce, South Carolina has taken a very neutral stance when it comes to state incentives and data centers. Based on your conversations, I know you work in multiple states. Where do you find South Carolina is compared to a Georgia, or we talked about Virginia earlier, or some of the other southern states when it comes to incentivizing and really wanting these data centers to locate within their borders?
I'd say each state kind of views it a little bit differently. Some states that may not have as much growth, so think some of the Midwest and Western, North Dakota, places like that, that don't have a lot of manufacturing growth, but they have available water and power. You're seeing some new incentives, primarily around sales tax exemption. Exempting sales tax for power is a big deal. Exempting sales taxes for servers. All of those are important to the data center locations. So some states are being more proactive, and then some are taking, I think, South Carolina's approach, which is not negative, but they're really not incentivizing like they do manufacturers.
Gotcha. That can be a little bit, that can be reassuring if I'm a manufacturer within South Carolina that the state's at least considering my best interest for future growth, to at least take a neutral stance to it.
Right.
So that's really, really interesting. Ben and Nelson, I'm going to kind of loop you guys in here because Nelson, I think you brought up a really good point with the EV craze. I feel like when I first came into THS, started my career here from 21 to really 23, there was this massive push from a construction standpoint, but also an incentive standpoint to get as many EV battery plants and anything in the EV battery cycle within South Carolina. And then the administration changed and the consumer spoke out a bit as far as demand with the types of cars they wanted to buy. And you almost heard EV battery projects just fall off a cliff almost. And in its place, you have data centers that have popped up in my mind, especially the larger scale. Do you guys see this EV craze? Is it a bubble, or is there more foundation here for this to have a little bit of a better chance to be a longer play here than what the EV cycle was the last 2 years?
I would say, comparing, I guess, EV requirements or needs and data centers, EV is a subset of the overall auto industry, right? And just like say, it's impacted or has been impacted by government incentives, that transition. And you're right, 4 years ago it was all EV. That has changed because of government incentives, policies. And so I don't think it's going to go away. It just may not be as, that transition is going to take longer.
Yeah.
For data centers, which is now, replaced the craze that EV had, I think because of AI and some of the other uses of data center, everyone is going to be using AI in the future. Not everybody's going to buy an EV, but for the most part, AI is going to impact everybody's daily life. We may not understand what that means now and in the future. So then that means how do you get the data centers in place to be able to accommodate the growth in AI and other technologies? So I think that's the major difference between those two sectors and how probably data centers are here to stay. Now they're going to change in form, where they locate, why they locate in certain areas, what the technologies are, but I just don't see them going away anytime soon.
Nice. Okay. All right. Awesome. Nelson, I appreciate that. And we will move on to Rosendin, kind of narrow down the focus a bit We've laid the framework for where the data centers are looking, why they're looking. Let's talk to Brandon Jachimski with Rosendin. And Brandon, if you want to take it away, give a little bit about Rosendin and your focus with them and your background.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me. Rosendin Electric, we're the largest private electrical company in the country. So we're based, I think, I don't know, 13, 14 offices across the country. I'm out of the East. I work on what we mentioned, Northern Virginia is one of my areas, Maryland, which is starting to get into data centers, and also the Carolinas. Our biggest, you probably know us as data center. We do other projects, but just our relationships built out of California and Texas have pushed east. As you see the market changing in Carolinas, we are preparing for a lot of work coming. It's doubled since I've been involved 3 years ago. So it's pretty exciting to be involved in the Carolinas and really wanting to build on the relationships that are out there.
So Brandon, talk us through a little bit about the actual construction scope, the features, the process that is unique when it comes to data centers when maybe compared to some of your other type of projects. So for
the scope, it's actually less challenging than maybe a hospital or commercial. There's a lot more customization in the hospital and commercial versus data center. The designs are driven by the end users. Most of our partners are hyperscale. We do have some colos and smaller companies that we work with, but pretty straightforward on the design. The biggest challenges we're seeing is the schedule, which is driven by the procurement of the equipment and the utility contracts, as mentioned. The schedules for these large data centers, less than 16 months, even sometimes 12 months. Versus a larger commercial hospital building might be 24, 36 months. It's a faster pace. So labor is our biggest problem right now. We're able to lean towards partnerships. As you see coming into the market now, I don't know, I think we're counting 8, 9 different large end users, and we're kind of getting out in front, like who wants to partner. When we partner, we're able to go out and build a team and not just scramble to just kind of throw something together and focus on quality innovation. So then the other item was procurement. We do have some customers that we are involved on the long lead items. We have some manufacturing done in Texas and Tennessee that are bought out at the early stages, but most of the time my teams are doing the short lead items, which are feeders, busway, copper, aluminum, a lot more customized items. But again, when I talk partnerships and pre-con, we're able to help go into value engineering to meet the schedule versus we do focus on cost, but really our end users have been focused on schedule. So what's available, and we try to stick to the specs, but sometimes when we're involved in the partnership and the pre-con, we can go to our relationships and kind of maybe settle on 1 or 2 things that aren't spec driven, but can get us some lead time, get us some benefits up front to the schedule, because we're always scrambling at the end when the large equipment comes in.
So when you say partner and value engineering and finding ways to do something, and sounds like in your case quicker than necessarily cheaper, what type of companies do you partner up with? Is that an engineer or is that a supplier?
So probably different than most contractors you're going to talk to. We tried to partner up with the end user. So,
okay.
I know that Ben's mentioned a couple of them. We're currently out at Maiden. We get on phone calls with that end user and we talk about terms and contracts and partnerships and the next opportunity. And it's really, we've become a staffing company. So basically they come to us and say, hey, can you get us a staff? It's a lot easier than the low bid competitive, we still chase some of those things, but our staff is happier when they know where they're going, and it's a partnership from start to finish versus, oh, you guys weren't the best price, but we needed you. And it gets challenging when you get into that conflict.
Can you talk a little bit more in detail on how some of these large scale data centers and maybe even small scale data centers, but how they affect the availability of construction materials, labor resources? I know for us, typically, if our clients have not done a construction project since 2019, they're in for a sticker shock on what construction prices have done since post-COVID. So can you talk a little bit about what some of these larger scale projects you do, what impact they have on other construction projects that may be going on in the area?
So again, on the procurement, mostly the owner is going right to the manufacturer, but we do see that they've gone. One of the items that's changed for us just recently, last year or two, we went from a pipeline of less than 12 months in data centers to 36 plus months, and that's based on, it's crazy. I mean, we we just did our first 3-year business plan because of how much information's out there, but that's driving the changes in the industry because the owner has gone out and bought all the medium voltage transformers and everything for 3-4 years out. So it's impacting maybe someone starting today, maybe somebody starting a year ago for designing their facility that the equipment's just not out there. They're changing the voltages. I know we're have a relationship for a large project potentially in Texas, and they're changing the voltages because of the procurement. Just what's more available, whatever the utility can give them, and then which equipment's more available is which way they're heading.
That's really interesting. It's as a fellow GC, usually energy and power are one of the longer lead time items. So to hear you say when end users are gobbling up transformers, that helps put in perspective of why some of that lead time is there with the demand on that material versus the supply, which again ties back into the earlier conversation Ben was discussing with on Duke and some of the other power companies that are out there to try to keep up with the demand.
We've seen the end users partner with the manufacturers and build the facilities to manufacture their equipment just for them. So it's great. It's a different industry than I came up in.
Yeah, absolutely. So one interesting thing that's out there that, in my opinion, is as these hyperscalers are out there and these mega data centers are built, do you see the end users or the manufacturing community maybe saying, hey, we want to bring this more local onto our property, onto our site, under our full control, rather than leasing a rack or a space in in Meta's new data center in Aiken? Do you see anything on the end user side that's for whether it's the MES or the ERP and production systems that's changed in their approach to how they handle those?
I like to that focused on quality and innovation. Just, we do lessons learned. We do it's about, again, I mentioned partnership a lot. Like, it's all about the manpower to get this work done. It's not complicated, but you don't want somebody just, oh yeah, I can do that, because there's a lot of redundancy. Safety is a big item because of the redundancy to the power, right? So nobody wants a storm to knock out their data, right? Because then no one can work. So like anybody, it's not everybody's I call them vertical. It's some, like a residential contractor probably shouldn't be messing around in it because safety, like, you have 4 different sources and lockout, tag out. So I would just recommend, if you're seriously interested in building something, talking to an electrical or mechanical contractor and seeing their availability before you go down the path. And what was mentioned earlier, the costs are skyrocketing when you wait.
Yeah, and kind of to wrap it up here, what do you guys see from your perspective that are the biggest challenges to meeting your clients' expectations versus the realities? And we've probably hit on some of those, but if you could sum it up, how would you sum it up?
I think the biggest thing is for me, it's been transparency. Just when we have a problem, I'm a project manager. I'm a solution driven person, and most of my team is. But the transparency of things happening around them and adjusting the plan. Typically, our team says, "Hey, we got a problem. We can get more time." The end users coming in this market, they're not stopping. They have contracts that they have to abide to. So, being transparent, we have a problem, and just pivoting and like, "Hey, this cost is going up. Let's talk about it. How do we help?" I it's a beneficial thing for me to work for Rosendin because we're about getting the job done and building relationships versus like nickeling and diming everything. Let's just make sure we get this job done. Let's be transparent. But partnerships and trust is a big thing on these data centers because of speed.
That's awesome. Brandon, I appreciate that. And Tony, we'll move over to you. Excuse me. And in AFL, Tony, if you want to take it away and share a bit about what you do and what AFL does.
Yeah. So AFL been around 41 years now. Happy to call the Upstate our home for our headquarters of AFL. Even though we're a global company, Duncan, South Carolina is our home. We manufacture products here, but we're located all over the world. We have facilities both in North America, in Europe, and in Asia. Focused primarily on what I'll call the fiber business. And it's not the fiber that's found in food. It's the fiber that transmits ones and zeros via light. We started like in '84 in the energy space where we're putting fiber to control the different locations for power centers. And that has transformed into the telecom segment, fiber to the home, and now focused on the hyperscale segment. My experience, as you see the title, Director of Client Success, and some might say, what the heck is that? But since 2018, focused on the hyperscale customers, 5 of the big 6 today. Our focus, my team's focus, is to ensure that if our customer is successful, these 5 hyperscales that we service today, then we will be successful. And so we interface with the commercial sales team, with all the internal functions of the company, whether it's operations, supply chain, engineering, PLM, you name it. My team helps ensure white glove service to these key customers today.
Yeah, and I really, really appreciate y'all hopping on board here. For those that don't know, AFL is a fellow OpExchange member. So I think they give a great insight on sort of the macro perspective of data centers. They're seeing an increase in sales, but also what this group is all about, which is efficiency, the lean manufacturing. How can you build your widgets or services better, quicker, faster, and more reliable? So they give a great insight into that hands-on experience. But what ways, Tony, have you guys leveraged the accelerating growth of the data center market, whether that's through new customers, product lines, services? How have you guys grown with the data center growth?
Well, yeah. So Shane, let me take it back from the beginning. I'm sure some of us have lived through the .com bubble. That was a fiber, explosion, but it died. Some of us lived through COVID and wondered what the heck's going to happen in this space. And so as AFL, we did too. We were able to survive the .com through COVID. In fact, COVID, unfortunately, was bad for some businesses. For AFL, it was good because it spurred the need for more fiber out in the network. Who ever heard of Zoom, right? Teams. Right. Now we need it, right? So that's data driven. Now lately, since about 2018, all these hyperscalers are now working on how do we get more data? Well, the key is AI, AI and machine learning. So that I'll call it a machine hungry apparatus. Even though it's not just an apparatus, we provide the passive components to like the NVIDIA graphic cards and all that stuff, but it's data hungry. AI is data hungry, power hungry, as we've heard already. These guys used to talk megawatt data centers. Now it's gigawatts. Well, that's 1,000 times a megawatt. and so that means for us as AFL, more fiber. So how do we do it? So we have to look at our operations both here in the Duncan area and our factories in Mexico, Europe, where we terminate fiber cable assemblies. Our customers with these large data centers are wanting to put more and more in them. So for us, it's higher fiber count cables. When we say fiber counts, we're producing on average 864 fibers in a cable. That's probably the diameter of a nickel. Wow. We can produce 13,000 fibers, so over 13,000 fibers in probably about 1.5 inches. And again, speed of light. So just imagine the information that is transferring back and forth. So these data centers are looking to use these cables of ours. So we have to be innovative. How do we package them? How do we terminate them? Dense is the key word, density, more in the same footprint because land is expensive, right?
Right.
I think it was Zuckerberg who said they're building a data center in Louisiana that's roughly a good coverage of Manhattan. So
Wow.
you think about that in scope and size, and for those who generate power, what that entails. For us, it's cables. How many fiber cables and terminations can they put in these locations? So we've had to look at ways to improve our efficiencies and output, how to make cables quicker, how to terminate these connectors or put connectors on cables. So those are the things we've been focused on. Unlike the dot-com era, companies were shaky. But when you look at these hyperscalers, they have the biggest market caps in the industry, in the
Right.
world. I mean, some of their
Right.
market caps are larger than countries. So they have the cash to spend, and that's good for business. They're willing to spend it. I think it was somebody said it before. Every couple of years, they'll just go through and throw out what they had, recycle it, put in new stuff. So we like that kind of business. It's good
Yeah,
for
heck
us,
yeah.
but it's challenging
How
as well.
as you guys in hearing earlier the quick timeline for construction, it's 11 to 12 months, and I'm sure they'd love to shrink that, they being the end user or the customer, shrink that as much as possible. So how does that quick turnaround time affect your efficiencies to deal with outputting more in a quicker fashion while maintaining your quality?
Great question, Shane. So for us, we can't wait a lot of times until the building's all up and then they tell us, oh, I need to order this. We're already starting months ahead of time. So we're working with these customers closely, the Microsofts, the Googles, the AWSs, so we know when these builds are going in. We anticipate. We'll bet on the come too, because we help with their architecture schemes from a fiber perspective. So we can help design what fiber they need in that building. And so we'll go ahead and start early to procure the fiber, to build the cable assemblies, because we can know what goes from one rack to another, how long they'll need them, what kind of connectors they need on the ends of those cables. So working closely with these hyperscalers has enabled us to try to keep pace with them. I mean, they're growing every day. Everybody sees it in the news, the growth. We're up front with them. We're in with them. They know us very closely. We treat them as a partner. I mean, they treat us as a partner. So they're giving us information that helps us to make advanced investments or builds or materials, whatever it may be, so that when they're ready, when the building's up, we're right in there. Our cables are being installed by, let's say, Brandon's team in crew in these data centers.
Yeah, that's how. So one question I want to try to answer for the Op Exchange members out there is that there may be different angles for you to get involved with this AI revolution. And maybe it's from a sales perspective, or maybe it's from an efficiency perspective with your own operations. But are there any strategies that you could share, or that you saw, hey, this was a great learning experience with AFL's journey into this space, or just your personal journey through it?
Yeah, one of the big things for us is AI is new to everybody, right? And we're learning it. In fact, we're embracing it. And that would be my word for everyone here on this chat today is embrace it. We're finding in the upstate here, the workforce, it's hard to get more people and talented people. So are there other ways to deal with that? Well, maybe AI is a way, because it's a learning machine. So if there's ways we can all implement and use AI, our company is encouraging everyone to use it. Of course, there's security risks. So, some AIs you may not want to use and put every confidential information on. But like with Microsoft's Copilot, which we're encouraged to use internally, our IT department has said, hey, we can control that a little bit more, but still get the benefits of AI. And so we're looking at tools to help all the operators in our company become more efficient in what they do, more output in what they do. So rather than having to hire 100 people, maybe we can hire 30 people and use the benefits of AI. So that's what I would encourage everyone right now to use it. It's good for business as well because it puts more demand, but however, there's benefits to it long term.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'll give you a case study just for us. We have on the business development and or internal marketing side of things, we've jumped headfirst into ChatGPT to help with everything from a marketing proposal to a marketing strategy to putting together a presentation for a webinar on data centers. So AI was a tremendous help to put this together. It also enabled us to look at our marketing efforts in a different light, where we no longer needed an internal marketing department. We were able to reduce costs there and go and outsource our marketing efforts. So it's I think jumping in is the best way to do it. Just in some way, shape, or form, getting on that hands-on experience.
But you have to pick up the kid that like.
Hey guys, can we put it on mute, please? If you're not one of the speakers, thank you. Tony, can you? And we'll go off script here a bit, but can you give maybe the listeners an idea? You mentioned a couple of different solutions that are out there from an AI standpoint. I know on an entry level scale, where THS is at the ChatGPT level, but it's, from what I hear, not the most secure. So if security is the most or a very important consideration for you, can you give an idea of some of the different platforms out there, or somewhere where they can go to learn about the different platforms?
Yeah, so AFL, our IT team, has really put out, I'm one of the members now for this IT initiative or AI initiative in our company. Being an older fella, it's new for me too as well, but I'm loving it. A lot of my team members are now using the Copilot, Microsoft's Copilot, because we're a Microsoft-based team here. We use a lot of their products for our office, but we're finding there's security there. But it's also helpful because a lot of our meetings, and there's a lot of meetings that go on, we can actually have Copilot generate the meeting notes and the actions. So it's wonderful. Now it's very easy. You're not having to sit and take notes. You can actually wait, get the report out from Copilot, and then, okay, here's my actions I have to work on, or whoever. So that's just one small use of it. We're looking for our engineers. How can they better utilize it in the factories, design-wise, you name it. So again, that's the one we use here at AFL. We're encouraged to use it, and I would encourage everyone else to start using AI.
Nice, good deal. Well, Tony, I appreciate your time. We will. We're going to move to Daedalus now, which is another fellow OpExchange member, to give their perspective on it with AI, data centers, data, the explosion of data, and everything else. Tom, you want to take it away and give a quick intro on Daedalus and your experience?
Yeah, Shane. Thank you for having us. So my name is Tom Zadera. I lead the commercial sales team here at Daedalus Industrial. We are based in Greenville, South Carolina, Easley to be exact, so just right outside of town. We specialize in the engineering, manufacturing, assembly, and installation of control systems for data centers. So if you think of control system being the automation and the control of your key process mechanical and your electrical gear throughout the facility. So really, our systems touch all of the system infrastructure that it takes to build a data center, and becomes the best friend of the operators once the construction teams leave. And as was mentioned by previous speakers here, that the work staff of these facilities is not comparable to what the square footage in a lot of these facilities are today. You might be thinking of anywhere from a 200 to a 1,000,000 square foot facility, and still only have a couple dozen people that are working inside of that environment. They heavily rely on the software tools at their fingers to have things like alarming, controls, modifications for things like temperature set points. Think of like changing your wall-mounted thermostat. Much more complex, but you've got your water conditioning systems, you've got your power selections, whether you're running off of different type of utilities, and obviously your backup power system. So our software tools help connect all of the viable infrastructure equipment to run these data centers on a day-to-day operation.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up there with the labor staff, and it was also touched on earlier. But when I go around talking to the different manufacturers in the community and some of our different clients, usually their biggest challenge is, like everyone else, is labor. So I think from a uninformed perspective, there can be this perception that, holy cow, this massive data center is coming here. It's going to be another competition or another competitor I've got with an already small labor pool. So to hear you talk about how big these buildings are versus how few employees they actually staff paints things in a little bit more of an accurate light. Whereas I feel some of the noise out there, it's not accurate to say that these are going to be massive job takers. The whole point is to reduce staff for these things and to become more efficient and take a bit of the human element out of it, or use the human element in a different way. Tom, can you talk a little bit about just the expansion of data centers, really, whether it's the last few years or even from their existence and your experience with them, but how their growth has impacted Daedalus's day-to-day operations?
Yeah. So I've been fortunate. I found this small little industry almost 20 years ago. I started working for a manufacturer's rep in the Washington, D.C. market when data centers started to explode. And so you start to think about the way that the networks are set up, right? So going directly back to Tony's point of how fiber connectivity really is the heart of how the global geography for where data centers are located, how that's come about. There's a very interesting statistic or map, if you will, for anybody that's never watched it. I would very much encourage everyone to Google what the global map for fiber connectivity looks like around the globe, because I think what a lot of people are uncertain of. You hear words like cloud computing. You think that it's floating around. You've got data that's shooting around through satellites and through cell phone towers. When in actual, it's hardwired data and fiber lines that wrap the world through subsea cabling that connects continents, so that data is coming, in milliseconds of latency across continents. And so that's a really, really interesting concept for people that aren't as familiar with this type of industry, that these are hardwired connections into these buildings that don't rely on, cell towers and satellites as much as you might think. And so,
Yeah.
but so from a growth standpoint, we'll say back in the 80s when the internet, first really started to become developed, the May East Internet Exchange node was placed outside of Washington, D.C., outside of a 30-mile radius, which would be your blast radius for any kind of, detrimental event, right? So Ashburn, Virginia was really founded as a place outside the city where the infrastructure could be could be founded. And so if you look at what the global landscape of data centers is, about 50% of the global data centers are in the United States, and almost 50% of the data centers in the US are located in Northern Virginia.
Wow.
Incredibly dense cluster. There's statistics that state that any internet search that any person around the world is performing, about 75% of those searches go through a server in Ashburn, Virginia.
Interesting.
And so that's an incredible amount of network traffic that goes through a very condensed area. But what we've seen is over the years, now that power is becoming such a driving factor in site selection, we're now seeing these pockets around the country that have old manufacturing locations or old grid capacity or transmission lines that lead to available substations, right? It's really how we see the resurgence and the selection of locations in the Carolinas, whether it's the old mill environments that have now closed, but they have substations with available power. So that's really what's given locations like the Carolinas an opportunity to jump into this marketplace. And so as you look at the fiber connectivity that really connects South America to the East Coast of the United States coming into Miami, those lines travel up the Eastern Seaboard into Atlanta, and then directly up through Richmond and up into Northern Virginia. And so I think that most of the folks here are very well suited to capture the growth that's now happening in these metro cities that stretch from Florida up to Virginia.
Yeah. So when you're working with your clients on the construction and the process of the maintenance and everything else involved with the data centers, what key factors would you recommend that have worked for Daedalus and your perspective, and that may work for some of the other fellow Op Exchange members?
Yeah. So when I look at, what our day-to-day operations look like, we are growing like crazy, and our company is probably growing, at 40, 50% a year. About 80% of our client base is data centers today, and we are keeping our head in that direction. These are the type of clients and opportunities that we're looking at because, there are few commercial clients out there that are going to be building a dozen or more, multiple dozen facilities a year. And so as you start tracking these, largest technology firms, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Googles of the world, they become large forecasted, multi-year, multi-decade clients that you can go along for a very long ride. And so what does that do for our work staff? We're in a continuous phase of recruitment. And so with, the industry growth being at 15 to 20% year over year growth, we're continuously recruiting skilled labor like automation technicians, engineers, field techs, electricians, foremen, and superintendents, because not only do we manufacture inside of our South Carolina location, we also do installation of these systems in the key markets around the world. So we've got traveling staff, and then we do partnerships with folks like Rosendin, where we might need electricians in a given marketplace, say the project's in Texas, or it's in Chicago, or it's in Phoenix, Arizona, the main metro hubs for data connectivity. We try to augment our staff by partnerships with large electrical partners.
And it's really interesting to hear the numbers and the growth opportunities that are out there. When you take a step back and you look at from a federal level support to at least a state level neutrality towards this opportunity, you talk to operations, and the culture of operations and the culture of sales is usually very different. Are there any complexities that have arisen from this growth that you're experiencing and that you're seeing? How do you grow responsibly? Whether that's, do you have a specific type of client you look for or you work with, or do you just cap it at a certain number of, hey, this is how much we're going to grow and this is it? Are there any growth management points you could hit on that have worked for you guys?
Yeah, listen, I think growth kind of unsettles everyone. And I think it's something you have to do responsibly, right? And I think of all of us on this call, we all know there's never a good time to sign a bad contract. Right. And so I think that as some of the largest players in the world are in the space, the stakes are high, right? And I think all schedules are based off of when tenants are moving into these facilities. So if you think of any of the co-location large clients that are in the Carolinas, think QTS, DC blocks, Digital Realty, just to name a few, right? They're signing tenant deals with folks like AWS and Microsoft and others, and their schedule is based off of when those clients are going to take ownership of those facilities. So then you're working backwards of, can you hit this schedule? And as others have mentioned here, we've gone from construction scales of commercial facilities, hospitals, K through 12s, from years down to months. And so the most common theme I hear from data center operations and procurement staff is, how do we reduce the overall cost of time to megawatt by 20%, both on cost of overall construction and then 20% of the construction scale. And so in order for us to hit those marks, a couple of things have to happen. One, we have to have really good relationships with our key suppliers. So we've got multiple options for hardware so that we're not bottlenecked on getting one part or piece that's specified. And we've got multiple different outlets and options that we can go to procure things like terminal blocks and power supplies, controllers, all the main, we'll say, widgets that go into a controls cabinet that need to be deployed to a job site. And so, we used to have, 10, 20, 30 panels maybe go into a job site. 10 years ago, data centers were 10 megawatts, right? That was a large facility. Now we're talking into hundreds of megawatts per facility. So you can multiply that by a, factor of 10. And so it's a lot more hardware, but then it's a lot more people. So again, we're then preaching our, we're building AI for these largest technology firms, but then we're also, as Tony had mentioned, using AI in our own business practices, whether it's in an estimating tools that we built so that we can streamline what that activity looks like, how long it takes to put together accurate estimates. And then that is the output of our, engineering documentation, right? We've built some in-house tool sets that allow us to use, wizard functions or AI features that allow us to automatically produce sets of mechanical electrical drawings with 3D renderings that are based off of client inputs. And so we're using that so we can dramatically streamline the time it takes to engineer and price a project, giving us much more time for execution.
Yeah,
And so
that's awesome. And that's fascinating too. For ever since post-COVID, it seems like supply chains has been in the news some way, shape, or form. So to hear some of your real world experience and the need to diversify the supply chains, that speaks wonders to really not only just manufacturing, but everything from finance to energy. You've got to have a robust solution for in case one of those suppliers goes down. So that's very, very good points on that. And I think that wraps it up for our canned questions and speakers. I think to wrap it up from my perspective, I wanted everyone to walk away with really your own key takeaways. Maybe there was something mentioned by one of the speakers that triggered a question in your mind or caused you to look at things a little bit differently, or to see how this rising tide may affect an opportunity or an expansion that you guys have. But I've written down a few of the key takeaways that I had personally walking away from this, and I've written them down here. But I think for me, it's there's so much opportunity here that you've really got to be careful to not go and chase shiny things, especially for some of the smaller companies and manufacturers that are a member of this. Find out where you fit in the data center supply chain and go focus on that area. It's really, really easy, especially for a sales guy. You see a shiny object and it's your attention span is like 5 seconds long. So you're chasing all kinds of different things, and you're 6 months down the road and you haven't accomplished anything. So just researching the supply chain, researching where you fit at and you can bring the most value in that supply chain is important. Lastly, I wanted to just reiterate that the OpExchange community is here for you as a resource. Mike does a great job. Mike and his team do a fantastic job of really getting the members to open up their doors, welcome communication, conversation, plant tours. At the end of the day, we want South Carolina to be as competitive as possible as we can on the manufacturing front. I can tell you right now that we've got tremendous competitors to the north and south of us with North Carolina and Georgia. So the OpExchange is there for your community to get better, get faster, get leaner, more educated, more safe. And Mike is there for you guys to help you find new ways to do that. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and we can take it away with some questions here.
Sure. And the OpExchange, again, one of this with this webinar, just from this webinar, I saw how many more OpExchange companies are already involved in this data center supply chain. Airsys, they contacted me. They're huge into this and the cooling systems for it, right? And the Southern Fab makes metal fabrication for some of the supplies of the data centers. So it's just getting huge already, and then it's just going to get bigger. So there's a few questions. So I saw that there was one: how does the threat of hurricanes impact the suitability of data centers in our area? Who can answer that one?
I mean, I can take that. I mean, from a site selection standpoint, I think there's an environmental scorecard that anyone will use when they're looking at kind of landing in a new spot. And so it is a driving factor. It is why you see a lot of locations, being built in very weather moderate areas. But I think the true scale of that is utility report and finding out what the annual outage are for that utility. And so any interruptions in utility, most level 3 data centers are looking for 5 nines of availability. So that basically leaves you with less than 300 hours of downtime in a given year. And so that is maybe the historical model for people that are looking to use utility as the main source of power for their facility. I think now the equation is shifting a bit because of the long backlog of requests and lead time on having new generation, new transmission, new substations built. A lot of folks are now optioning to have on-site power generation, which is really a paradigm shift in this type of client market. you're now thinking not just building $1 billion facility that's going to have $7 to $8 billion worth of computer hardware inside. You now might be building an on-site power plant to serve as your main power supply, and then using utility on peak rates and looking at when it's beneficial for your business model to be running on utility versus running on your own generation. And so that's got its own complexities, both with manufacturing, operations, and then in controls. Right. If you're an operator, what is your triggers for selecting what utility makes the most sense based on your kW per rate hour? So it's an interesting equation as far as if weather has a true impact on your site selection.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think you're seeing data centers being built kind of towards Virginia Beach because you've got cable landing stations there. You're also seeing Google and others take advantage of the cable landing in Myrtle Beach that DC Blocks has, and data centers can be built anywhere. It's just a function of cost, and they can be hurricane proof, they can be earthquake proof. It's just a matter of how much you want to spend to do that, and if there are other locations that are better and less expensive. I think it's going to come down to where's the power going to be available. I think the power that's being consumed is maybe along the I-85 corridor. And I think that's going to run out. And I think that people are going to have to start looking for sites that are maybe closer to the coast that have available capacity. I do think that people will take advantage of, again, there's development along the transatlantic cable line or the cable landing station and the fiber that goes from Myrtle Beach down to Charleston and then on through, I think it's Augusta and on to Atlanta. I think you'll probably see some development along that fiber line, and Savannah River site is coincidentally along that fiber line. I think that could materialize much in the way it has in Virginia as well.
I had another question. What types of jobs and positions are required on site at a data center? Who would know the answer to that?
I'm happy to take that one as well. I mean, look.
Yeah, take it away, Tom.
Yeah, so typically you need site operations team, and those people have backgrounds. I mean, one of the key resume builders that you see a lot in the data center world today are people that spent time in the military. So there's a large contingent of Navy submariners and surface warship veterans who are running these plant operations. Reason being is they're incredibly disciplined and they're very prescriptive in following a method of procedure and not deviating from that method of procedure, no matter what you might find. And so these are very, very complex environments. And so you look at people that know how to run large mechanical plants. So you're looking for mechanics. You have electricians on staff. You have plumbers on staff to deal with water issues. You have security professionals to deal with, the multi-layers it takes to get everywhere from driving in the gate to badging in the building to badging in the data hall to then if there's additional security constraints along the way. You've got networking professionals, right? So folks that are, familiar with, running fiber, patching panels, and doing, firmware upgrades on hardware equipment. So there's a very large range of individuals that are needed to run a staff. But I'd say the technical fields, the trades, and the engineers are hot jobs, and there are not enough to come by today. I think there's very much a gap today in the employment available work staff, and that gap is only going to increase by the amount of demand that we're talking here today.
So that leads another question for both Tom and Tony. So your volumes have increased, right? And do you, in the next several years, do you see that going exponentially higher based on this boom? And if so, how are you going to handle the workforce at your own manufacturing sites?
So I'll take that. Our projections on capital spend by these hyperscale customers will continue to grow at least through 2030. We're predicting growing every year from where they started, 8-10 years ago. And again, as I mentioned during my presentation, what we're noticing is these hyperscales will, in essence, re-innovate their data centers. So as new technology becomes available, they will rip out what's in there and they will put in new stuff. So from a sustainability standpoint on our end, we see the business there. Will they ever, stop or plateau? Maybe, but we haven't seen that yet.
I'll add real briefly. I think we have some stats that show that the amount of a product that's under construction has increased 12-fold since 2020. And I don't think we forecast any slowdown at this point.
Wow. Wow.
I've heard the stat, maybe the comment around, if the AI boom is a concert, we're probably still in the line leading into the parking lot. So I don't think the party's really even started yet. Baseball analogy, I'd say we're probably in the very, very early innings of what we're going to see. If anybody saw the media, large news story that came out last week about OpenAI recently signing a $300 billion lease with Oracle. And that is for up to 5 gigawatts of capacity starting in FY27 and stretching to FY32. And that's just the first of, I think, many mega announcements that we're going to see. And you've got, we'll say the Magnificent Seven, but it's really 3 or 4 that are kind of drifting at the top. And then you're going to see all the other people that are trailing behind them with, monies and with totals that might not rival that, but will be impressive by any comparison on another commercial market.
So Catherine had a question. Do the utility regulations in South Carolina permit behind-the-meter power generation on the gigawatt scale for individual data centers?
I'll try to speak on that one a little bit without sharing too much, but we have one project in South Carolina where it's in Dominion's territory, and Dominion is competing with capital resources from Dominion, Virginia, and they don't have the resources really in the state of South Carolina to add more generation on a speculative basis. So they're open to the idea of, I think, conversations around maybe private development of power generation, where then they take ownership of the asset after there's load on the asset and customers paying for it. I think that's just kind of a topic that's open for discussion with the power environment the way it is today.
Then Catherine also asked if data centers contract their own manufacturing of transformers and mechanical electrical equipment, will this compete with what utilities need for grid modernization?
I'm not going to take that.
And I'd say absolutely. So something we saw, this was a major shift happened in the data center procurement market over the last 10 years. But prior to 10 years, it was very, very much the traditional channels where, equipment was procured by mechanical, electrical contractors. It was then transacted to general contractors and then to an owner. The largest owners that realized they were buying hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment every year realized that they could, kind of jump that chain and also get better pricing and better support for, post-installed operational systems by having direct relationships with manufacturers. So today, if you look at the largest players, they all have what you call OFC model supply chain agreements. And OFCI is owner furnished, contractor installed. So if you think of a 100 megawatt facility that requires, 100 backup generators and maybe multiple hundred transformers, they're purchasing those things directly in most cases. And so, yes, they are taking them off the open market, which the open market also includes, utilities that have to then go procure that same equipment. And so there is a log jam, or we say a large queue in the waiting line of manufactured production. And the smartest and most advanced mature data center companies have long lead supply chain OFCI agreements in place with things like generators, power distribution equipment, chillers, and anything that's in the critical path that has, we'll say 40 to 80-week lead times on these largest equipment. And some of them even have large scale stocking programs where they have a more matured, we'll say standardized design, and that they know they can go bulk buy multiple projects and have a staging location to have that equipment stand by and ready should permitting in South Carolina hit a snag, they can then send that to, Virginia, or Virginia has a snag, they can send that equipment to Chicago. And so that's a mitigation strategy that a lot of the largest players are using today so they can keep projects on pace and keep equipment flowing into their supply chain.
All right, got one more question that I was going to bring up before we end. This is Eugene. What's the general structure of a tax incentives or other incentive package that a community may offer when recruiting a data center?
Yeah, I'll take that one. From a community standpoint, it's all about property taxes, especially in South Carolina. When you're talking about hundreds of millions and even billions in capital investment for these data centers, the tax bills, especially in South Carolina, are astronomical. And so communities, counties in particular, can offer property tax abatements, long-term agreements to lower those property taxes. Because without it, it's very difficult to make the numbers work from a pro forma analysis. Now, I mean, that's taken the power costs and all that, but property taxes can be significant. On the state side, it's about sales tax exemptions, particularly on the power purchase, as well as sales taxes on servers, which again make up the bulk of that CapEx. And so you can exempt those over time on the state level. Those are I'd say the two main incentives, at least in South Carolina.
All right, I think we're going to have to wrap it up now. It's right at noon. Shane, any other closing comments?
No, I really, really appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate the time of all the guests, and appreciate everyone tuning in. It's a really, really cool topic with a lot of opportunity. So hopefully everybody learned something, and thanks again.
And I'd add, both Tom and Tony, accentuate what you said, embrace AI. Again, we're seeing it as we're going to these off-exchange events, the companies that are really using it and being smart about it, not worried about the shiny object, but actually looking at how it makes practical sense. It's a beautiful thing. All right, well, thank you all. Again, a great event.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.